I'm Anthony F. Elmore, President and Founder of the Proud Black Buddhist World Association. We at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association are not only the Black Buddhist voice in America, we are the Black Buddhist voice of the world. And today we bring you another exciting Black Buddhist lecture. Now our lecture today is called Buddhism and Kwanzaa. Now we chose this topic, Buddhism and Kwanzaa, because Kwanzaa is an African American celebration that started in 1966 and 1967. Now, one of the things that we do at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association, we teach Buddhism inclusive of our black history, culture, and language. Now, again, my lecture is called Buddhism and Kwanzaa, a Black Buddhist lecture. We who are proud Black Buddhists teach Buddhism based on the teachings of the 13th century Black Japanese Buddhist sage Nichiren Shonin. It is Nichiren Shonin who teaches us that the essence of the Buddhist teachings is the Lotus Sutra, and we're to only practice the Lotus Sutra. Now, the first thing that I want to do, I want to ask a question. You see, many white people have written me, and what they complain about, they say, why is it that you have a Black Buddhist sect? Don't you know that you are dividing people having a Black Buddhist sect or Black Buddhist teachers? Now, we at the Proud Black Buddhists would like to answer white people regarding this question, and we also want to teach Black people why it is important to have Black Buddhist teachers. The first thing that I can say to white people and others who teach Buddhism is that we as Black people can speak to other Black people better than a white person or any Asian can speak to Black people. We need Black people to speak the language or talk to other Black people. That's plain and simple. Now, those of you who are listening to this Black Buddhist lecture, please understand that Kwanzaa and Proud Black Buddhists are interrelated. Now, before I get deep, for the sake of some white people, there are Asians and those who have never heard of Kwanzaa. Now, Kwanzaa is an African American celebration that's going to be happening just after Christmas. Now, it began in 1966 and 1967. It was started by an Afrocentric or a Black history teacher by the name of Dr. Malana Karenga. Now, Kwanzaa is a celebration that has its roots in the Black nationalist movement in the 1960s and was established as a means to help African Americans reconnect with our African cultural and historical heritage, meaning to help African Americans. We do this by uniting in meditation and study of African traditions in a style called the New Zosaba, the 7 principles of African heritage. Now, Dr. Karenga said this was a communitarian African philosophy. Now, see, Kwanzaa was established to help African Americans to reconnect with their African culture and historical heritage. Please understand that ancient India was known at the time of the Black writer, the Black Greek writer whose name was Homer. India was known as Eastern Ethiopia. Now, Kwanzaa helps us to connect to our African heritage. Now, one of the things that's missing that a lot of people, or a lot of the African-centered scholars do not talk about. They rarely talk about the Africans of Asia. You see, ladies and gentlemen, to get into our African history, it's important that you understand and learn about the Africans of Asia. Now, it was in 1929 when Dr. Carter G. Woodson formed Black History Week that later became as Black History Month. You see, white people extricated all black history from the history books. Anything that was positive about black people, it was extricated. Now, one of the greatest teachings in history of black people or African people is the story of the Africans of Asia. Now, you should Google this. Now, you see, when we think of Africa, what white people have you believe in is that African history and culture is a bunch of uneducated people who are natives who are running around naked with a bone in their nose. Now, they are clear not to teach you about the Africans of Asia. You see, ladies and gentlemen, a group of people called Cushites left Africa and they inhabited the whole world. Now, the Cushites went into what we know today as India. Now, it was a river called the Sarasvati River. Now, this Sarasvati River civilization, they created a history in a culture that was so fascinating and so well developed that it took people known as white people 2,000 years to make a comfortable city. You see, this was called the Indus Valley Civilization or the Sarasvati River, or you call this the Harappan civilization of black people who came from Africa. They were called the Africans of Asia, and they set up a civilization that's so advanced that it took 2,000 years before a white community called Rome had a similar or something as equal as the planet. You see, in the Sarasvati River civilization, they had indoor toilets, running water, and it was a very advanced civilization. Many people often tell me this, well, the Buddha couldn't be black because the Buddha was not a prince. See, all they know, or all most white people know, or at least want to reveal, is that they want to teach you that Africans were uncivilized people. Now, this stuff happened only in the AD. Now, what we want to do is that, you see, let's explain what happened to black people. You see, this ties into the Buddhist religion. You see, in the 2nd century AD, India was conquered by a king, a white Kushan king by the name of King Kanishka. I want you to Google King Kanishka. See, it was King Kanishka who introduced a new form of Buddhism that separated Buddhism based on race, culture, and language. This new Buddhism that King Kanishka introduced was called Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism is the time in history, that's the 2nd century AD, where they not only changed the Buddha from black to white, and you can see this image of the Buddha and what is called the Gandhara images that King Kanishka had commissioned his carvers to do. But King Kanishka not only changed the Buddha from black to white, King Kanishka introduced a new Buddhism called Mahayana Buddhism that was taught in a new language that they never heard of in India called Sanskrit. Sanskrit is a language, whereas the Brahmins, who were the religious leaders of India, They were light-skinned people, descendants of the white people, and they created the world's first codex of racism that spread it throughout the world. For the first time in the history of humankind, racism was created in India via a system called the caste system. The word caste in India means varna. Varna means color, where whites were at the top and blacks were at the bottom. Now, the people who did not agree with the caste system, who were the Buddhists, they were not even in a caste. They put them into a subhuman caste, and they called them outcasts, or they called these black people the Chandelas. Now, what happened in the history of mankind was, in the 2nd century AD, or about 1900 years ago, they started the caste system. Now, what they did was they used the Sanskrit language to rewrite history. Now, how they rewrote history is that they extricated all black people out of Buddhist history. They regulated black people to a subhuman class, and those who agreed with the caste system, they put them at the bottom. They were called the sutras. You see, you had the Romans at the top, you had the vassals, the businessmen. They were like second, and then you had all these 4 different castes. Now, the Brahmins created a new religion. Now, this new religion is called Hinduism. Now, please understand that the word Hinduism does not exist in the ancient writings. See, the Brahmins created a writing called the Vedas, and the Vedas was used to create or to rewrite history. Now, they took the teachings of the writings that was of the Buddha that was in Pali, and they changed it and created a language called Sanskrit. Now, let's get back to our lecture, Buddhism and Kwanzaa, a Black Buddhist lecture. See, we call the AD the time in history to mean Africans' disadvantage, or the fall of African empires and the rise of white supremacy. You see, again, Kwanzaa was established as a means to help African Americans to reconnect to our African culture and history. Now, what you see is that Africans in America, we were brought to America as slaves. And not only were we brought to America as slaves, we had to work in slavery for hundreds of years. After slavery was over with, they came up with a new system called the Jim Crow laws in America. And after the Jim Crow laws and being terrorized and going through a lot of pain and struggle, it was the Civil Rights Act of 1964, whereas African Americans had a break in that they created, there was Dr. King and others who got the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed. So prior to 1964, America was a segregated nation, whereas all history, culture, and language, and anything positive about black people was not included in the history books. Now, what I would like you to do, I would like to refer you to January the 24th, 1964. Now, on January 24th, 1964, Malcolm X, who taught African American history, what Malcolm X wrote on January 24th, 1964, this was Malcolm X wrote. Now, the book is called Malcolm X on Afro-American History. You see, in 1964, or during the 60s, the time of the black movement, when black people began to awaken, we begin to learn our history, and this is what Malcolm writes about Buddhism. He says this, quote, and at a time beyond this, there was a black-skinned people in India who were black, just as black as you and I, called Dravidians. They inhabited the subcontinent of India even before the present people that you see living there today. And they had a high state of culture. The present people of India even looked upon them as gods. Most of their statues, if you notice, have pronounced African features. You go right to India today, in their religion, which is called Buddhism, they give all their Buddhas the image of a black man. Now, he goes on further with the lips, nose, even showed his hair all curled up in his head. They didn't curl it up. He was born that way. All these people lived in that area before the present people in India live today. You see, 2 years after Malcolm X made this, Dr. Kwanzaa introduced Kwanzaa. Now, we practice the Buddhist teachings as taught by the 13th century Black Buddhist sage Nichiren Shonin. Now, Nichiren taught that the Lotus Sutra, the highest of the Buddhist teachings, teach us to embrace Kwanzaa. See, Nichiren teaches us that the essence of the Lotus Sutra is in the title. And our understanding of the title of the Lotus Sutra helps us to embrace Kwanzaa. You see, why do we encourage Black Buddhists to embrace Kwanzaa? You see, the title of the Lotus Sutra is Yo Ho Renge Kyo. Now, the word yo means correct. It also means to open. It also means incomprehensible. Now, yo means wonderful and yo means mystic. Now, the word ho means life or law or life's manifestations. Life can only manifest itself via what we call ho. Now, we in Buddhism call life's and its manifestations yo-ho or mystic law. Now, the Buddha called upon a metaphor to explain this law, and he used the lotus symbol so people can understand the law. See, the lotus has the flower in the seed that comes together, which represents the simultaneousness of cause and effect. So, when we say the words Myoho Renge or Myoho Lotus, this is explaining this mystic law that exists throughout the universe. Now, in order to explain it, Nichiren gives us the word Kyo. Now, the word Kyo, one definition of Kyo, means to overcome delusion. Now, in the Gosho, it's called the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra. Now, the Gosho are letters that Nichiren wrote to teach his disciples. This is kind of like a Bible, where we get the teachings of Buddhism of Nichiren Shonin. Now, in the Gosho, the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra reads, quote, within this single character, Kyo, are contained all the sutras in the worlds throughout the 10 directions. It is like a wish-granting jewel that contains within it all manners of treasures, or the vastness of space that encompasses all phenomena. And because this single character, Kyo, of Myoho Renge Kyo, is the supreme achievement of the Buddha's lifetime of teachings, the other 4 characters, Myoho Renge, likewise surpass all 80,000 doctrines that the Buddha taught. You see, what this means, ladies and gentlemen, is that Kyo equals all the teachings of the Buddha, and it equals all the teachings of the universe. So, when we embrace Kwanzaa, we are embracing Buddhism because Kwanzaa and Buddhism is the same thing. Now the difference is this, what the Buddha teaches us. You see, Myoho Renge Kyo is the true aspect of phenomena. It's called Shoho Jiso Sho, which means the true aspect of phenomena, or all entity manifests its true nature. Now, you got the same law. Now the law can manifest good or evil. See, Nichiren explains it like this. When the law manifests evil, then it comes across or it manifests as delusion. On the other hand, when the law manifests good, it appears as enlightenment. That is the difference between delusion and enlightenment, is good and evil. Now, we people in America who identify ourselves as black were not only robbed of our history, our culture, and our language, we were robbed of our self-worth as humans. Even after slavery was abolished, we lived in the terror of Jim Crow and legal segregation. Segregation was legal until the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now, it was Shakyamuni Buddha who first intoned Myoho Renge Kyo. Now, Nichiren Shonin added the Pali word. He added the word Namu. Namu means to awaken. Now, what happened to us black people in the 1960s? See, we discovered our inner pride, and we began to find ourselves via our history, culture, and language. See, Dr. Malena Karenga came up with the idea that is now an African American celebration using the African language called Swahili. Now,
is a Pan-African and African-American holiday that is a celebration of family, community, and culture. It is organized around 7 fundamental principles, and it's a 7-day holiday that begins from December the 26th and goes through January 1st. And it's 7 days to, in fact, teach the 7 principles, okay, which are in Swahili and then in English: Umoja, unity; Kujichagulia, self-determination; Ujima, collective work and responsibility; Ujamaa, cooperative economics; Nia, purpose; Kuumba, creativity; and Imani, faith. And so I created Kwanzaa for 3 basic reasons. First, to reaffirm our rootedness in African culture. Because even though we are African people, due to the Holocaust of enslavement, we were lifted out of our own history and made a footnote and forgotten casualty in European history. And so the struggle we were waging, as Cabral said, is to return to our history and to use it to enrich and expand our lives. Secondly, I have created Kwanzaa in order to give us a time when we as African people all over the world could come together, reaffirm the bonds between us, and meditate on the meaning and awesome responsibility of being African in the world. And certainly it has flowered because of that. Because if you look at how it has grown, over 28 million people celebrate this holiday on every continent in the world, throughout the world African community. And the third reason I created Kwanzaa was to introduce and reinforce the importance of African culture and African community and values. And by community and values, I mean values that stress and strengthen family, community, and culture. These are our strength. And at the hub and hinge on which this holiday turns, of course, and the central values are the Nguzo Saba, which we said earlier are Umoja, unity; Kujichagulia, self-determination; Ujima, collective work and responsibility; Ujamaa, cooperative economics; Nia, purpose; Kuumba, creativity; and Imani, faith.
How does Kwanzaa relate to Buddhists or Buddhism? See, Shakyamuni Buddha taught the precept that Buddhism should be taught according to the customs of a region. This is what Nichiren writes in the Gosho. Now this Gosho is called the Expedient Means and Lifespan Chapters. Now this is what Nichiren writes about what Shakyamuni taught. And it reads, quote, when we scrutinize the sutras and treatises with care, we find that there's a teaching about a precept known as following the customs of the region that corresponds to this. The meaning of this precept is that, quote, so long as no seriously offensive act is involved, then even if someone were to depart to some slight degree from the teaching of Buddhism, it would be better to avoid going against the manners and customs of the country. This is a precept expounded by the Buddha. It appears that some wise men who are unaware of this point. Unquote. You see, many black people who practice Buddhism under Asians are either unaware of the point or they choose to disrespect the teachings of the Buddha Shakyamuni and allow whites and Asians to extricate all black Buddhist history, culture, and language from the Buddhist teaching. You see, Buddhism is ancient black history of the Africans of Asia. See, Kwanzaa is related to the teachings of Nichiren Shonin. You see, let's go into this and let's talk about Kwanzaa. See, the first day of Kwanzaa is called Umoja. See, Umoja means unity, to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race. Now, Nichiren writes about this unity in a Gosho called Many in Body, One in Mind, and it reads, quote, if the spirit of many in body, but one in mind prevails among the people, they will achieve all their goals, whereas if one in body, different in mind, they can achieve nothing remarkable, unquote. Now, the second Kwanzaa principle is called Kuji Shakalia. See, Kuji Shakalia, what that means is this: to define ourselves, name ourselves, as well as to create and speak for ourselves. See, this is a major principle of Kwanzaa, but it's also a principle of the proud black Buddhist. Now, I want to give you a real life example of the Kwanzaa principle, Kuji Chakalia, or defining yourself. You see, Tina Turner is the most noted Buddhist on planet Earth. Now, Tina Turner, a black woman, one thing that you will never see in Tina Turner is any Asian in her shadow or an Asian speaking for Tina Turner. See, Tina Turner practiced Kuji Shakalia of self-determination. She defines herself. She don't need an Asian to speak for her. We at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association practice the Kwanzaa principle, Kuji Shakalia. We are not just Buddhists, we are proud black Buddhists, and we define the policy in the teachings of Buddhism. Now, the third principle of Kwanzaa is called Ujima. Now, Ujima means collective work and responsibility. That means to build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and to solve them together. Now, that's Ujima. In Buddhism, we call this the way of the Bodhisattva. See, the Bodhisattva means to do good, to help others. You see, so we get involved in our community, we get involved in our country, and we work to make a better, not only a better America, but we work hard to make a better world. Now, that's Ujima. Now, the fourth is called cooperative economics. That is to build and maintain our stores, shops, and other businesses and to profit from them together. See, this too is unity. Now, the fifth principle is called Nia. That means purpose. Now, to make our collective vocation the building and development of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness. See, we at the Proud Black Buddhist World Association fight hard to change the ghetto into greatness. Let me give you an example. I want you to look at this house. Now, this altar was made in Accra, Ghana. Everything in this house is an African heritage. It relates our African culture. It relates our history. When you look at the clothes I wear this is a kente cloth made in Ghana. So we support cooperative economics. We have created jobs, and we made our neighborhood better than what it is before we moved here. For example, I live in a black neighborhood in Memphis called Orange Mound. Orange Mound is the first black neighborhood in America that was built for blacks by blacks. In fact, in the movie Hustle and Flow, there were some young men just right in this neighborhood. They got the first Grammy Award for the song It's Hard Out Here Being a Pimp. The Orange Mound hip hop group 3-6 Mafia found near a purpose in their own neighborhood. They didn't have to go out to some Oriental to look outside themselves. They looked within themselves and they found gold in their own backyard. They became the first hip hop group in America to win an Academy Award with rap music. They found this within inside themselves. See, this is how you do things. Like we in this house here, for instance, if you look at our house, we decided not to go outside of our community, but to look within our culture, our history, our language. And when you look at our house here, you look on the outside, you see a gold house, you see the African carvings, you see the history, the culture. You walk inside this house and you see the Lotus Sutra doors. See, Buddhism is not outside yourself. Buddha exists within you. We all have a Buddha nature. And the sixth principle of Kwanzaa takes us to that Buddha nature. The sixth principle of Kwanzaa is called Kuamba. Now, Kuamba means creativity. It means to always, as much as we can, in a way we can, in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited. You see, the principle of Kwanzaa is a Buddhist principle, in that a Buddhist principle means doing good. It means coming into your community and building your community, making your community first rate. We don't have to look outside ourselves to find our dignity, our culture, our pride. We can find these things inside ourselves, and we can be the model for the next generation. I don't have to go to some Asia to find a Buddha or to find Buddhism. Buddha exists within yourself. Now, again, the sixth principle is called Kuamba, or creativity. It takes creativity to write these Black Buddhist lectures, but you find the creativity within yourself. And the last principle of Buddhism is the most important. You see, the seventh principle of Buddhism is called Imani. Now, the word Imani, it means faith in the language of Swahili. Now, and it says to believe with all our hearts in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. See, our struggle in Buddhism is to fight the racism. Our struggle is to challenge the Asians and whites who extricated all of our Black Buddhist history, culture, and language. You see, in the Gold Show, the real aspect of the Gohanzan, it tells us an important, or teaches us an important lesson on faith. It reads, quote, "To have faith is the basis of Buddhism." Thus, the fourth volume of Concentration and Insight states, quote, Buddhism is like an ocean that one can only enter with faith, unquote. The fourth volume of the Annotations on the Great Concentration and Insight explains this, quote, with regard to the phrase, Buddhism is like an ocean that one can only enter with faith. Even Confucius taught that faith is first and foremost. How much more so is this true with the profound doctrines of Buddhism? Without faith, how could we possibly enter? The way to enter Buddhahood and to find the happiness that the Buddhist practice brings is to have faith. Have faith in yourself, have faith in your community, have faith in who you are, have faith in our nation. This is who we are as Buddhists. We are proud Black Buddhists, people who have faith. See, Buddhism, Buddhahood is not looking outside yourself. Anyway, let me bring this proud Black Buddhist lecture to a conclusion. We've covered the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. Now, let me explain one of Black America's greatest benefits of becoming Black and proud. During my youth, we developed many things. And so when I was coming up, I lived in an area or a time to where we Black people found a sense of pride. And the first thing we did to challenge the racism was we began to be natural. We grew the natural hairstyles, we grew the big afros, and we began to show our history, our culture, because we was Black and proud, and we showed our natural hairstyles. And today, we are so proud that you can look into the Black community today, and we have the most beautiful and the most creative, the most dynamic hairstyles. We can look at Black women today. They don't have to be sitting, putting chemicals in their hair, trying to straighten their hair to be like white people or to make their hair straight. Or if they have the option to make their hair straight, that's good too. But what we have developed through our pride and through our history and through our culture and understanding who we are and finding dignity within ourselves, we got people now, beautiful Black women, who dig inside themselves and come up with the most beautiful, dynamic, natural hairstyles. And I am so proud of that. That too is a part of Kwanzaa, finding our heritage, finding ourselves. We don't have to put chemicals in our hair. We don't have to have straight hair. Now, it's a choice, it's an option, but the most important thing is that now we have options. We can be proud of who we are. Now, when you deal with the hair or the locks, that is really the Buddhist hairstyle, because the original person that wore locks in their head, you can look at a Buddha statue and what you see is locks. You see braids because the Buddha was a brother and the Buddha put locks on his hair. Anyway, let me bring a conclusion to this proud Black Buddhist lecture. I was talking to a young lady by the name of Dawn Carter, who lives in Evanston, Illinois. It's just outside of Chicago. And she asked me, said, what lecture are you doing? I said, well, I'm doing a lecture called Kwanzaa and Buddhism. She said, what is Kwanzaa? I said, Kwanzaa is our African American celebration. She said, well, I never heard of Kwanzaa. I said, well, look it up. You should practice Kwanzaa as a proud Black Buddhist. You should take your child to Kwanzaa. You should engage in your history, your culture. Most important, I shared with Dawn that what she should do, she should get involved in Kwanzaa. And since this is our African heritage, she should tell and introduce the Africans of Asia. The Africans of Asia was the Buddha. In fact, remember we told you earlier that there was a group of people who traveled all over the world. They were called the Kushites. And many of us who practice Nichiren Buddhism, we got our Buddhist teachings from the Japanese. They taught us about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. They taught us about Nichiren Buddhism. Now, in the original people of Japan, they're called Jomon people. Now, one of the tribes of people in Japan were called the Anu. The Anu and the Kushites are one and the same people. So, in fact, in Japan, the largest indoor Buddha statue in the world is in Japan. So we got our Black history in Japan, we got our Black history in China, we got our Black history all over the world. In fact, the original people of America was Black people. That's a whole different story. Anyway, we're going to close this lecture, Buddhism and Kwanzaa. I am Anthony Elmore, President and Founder of the Proud Black Buddhist World Association, bringing you another Proud Black Buddhist lecture called Buddhism and Kwanzaa. Thank you very much. Forward! Forward! Come on, y'all, move forward! 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 Move forward! Forward! A new life is waiting on you! Forward! Chanting the Daimoku! Forward! Practicing the Lord Sutra! Your dreams will now come true. Forward, forward. A new life is waiting on you. Let's don't look backwards. Forward. See things through. Forward. Forward. Follow the Lotus Sutra. Forward. Forward. Make your dreams come true. Forward. That's the thing to do. Forward. Forward. What they call true Buddhism. Forward. It's Japanese nationalism. Forward. Forward. It's a form of racism. Forward. Forward. Follow the Lotus Sutra. Move forward. Is what you do. Forward. Follow the Lotus Sutra. Forward. And make your dreams come true. Forward. Forward. Nichiren is not the true Buddha. You follow the Lotus Sutra. Forward. Shakyamuni is the true Buddha. Forward. He says so. That's in the Lotus Sutra. It's a new year. Let's move forward. 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 Many tell the SGI goodbye. Let's move forward. Forward. We want true Buddhism. Forward. We don't want Japanese nationalism. Forward. Forward. We don't believe in racism. Let's move forward. Forward. The thing to do forward is practice. Let's move forward. The Lotus Sutra. Forward. Forward. Let's move forward. Forward. They said Nichiren started true Buddhism. Forward. That is Japanese nationalism. That's a form of racism. Come on, y'all, move forward. Forward. I left Nichiren Shoshu forward to follow forward the Lotus Sutra. Forward. To find Buddhism that is true. Forward. 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 I left the SGI. Move forward. Forward. And let me tell you why. Forward. Forward. They practice Japanese nationalism. Forward. And that's a form of racism. Let's move forward. Forward. Really tell the SGI forward. Goodbye. Let's move forward. Forward. We want true Buddhism. Forward. And not Japanese nationalism. Move forward. Forward. We don't believe in racism. Forward. We practice true Buddhism. Move forward. 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 How can the Asians move forward? Forward. Brother. Forward. Call me brother. Forward. When they don't respect forward our culture. Let's move forward. Forward. How could you possibly love us? Forward. Let's move forward. Forward. when they put us on the back of the bus. Many Japanese are serious. They want to make themselves superior. That's why they call Nichiren the true Buddha. But us, we follow the Lotus Sutra. Let's move forward. We practice freedom, justice, and equality for all. That's why we're the red suited, and we are the proud Black Buddhists. I get down on my knees and I pray every day. I pray the Lord of Sutra way. I pray every day to do my best to practice peace and love and respect.